And it's a little different chapter, but I think we're going to enjoy it. And every time I look at the chapter, I always try to come up with what I think would all the verses kind of fit under a major theme, if I could say that. Like we title our message, Brother Chuck, I like to title each chapter. And the thing that stood out with me was the King in his person. There's an amplification of his person. In fact, so much, one place we're going to go to today, the disciples fell down and worshiped him. That's pretty big, ain't it? And said, "Surely thou art the Son of God." That's exactly who Jesus is. And he's certainly worthy of our worship. All right, so we're looking at the King in his person, chapter number 14. And we're looking at really a general overview to start with. So this is the basic chapter outline. This really has three major sections. Three major sections.
Is there going to be a handout?
I'm going to give it to you following this, okay? Because I can be distracted.
I was going to write it down if it wasn't.
Yeah, you can get a handout. We'll go back over that, Miss Sheila.
Okay.
But just kind of, we'll focus on the Bible more this morning, and then we'll get the handout. But first of all, the first three verses you find in introduction to the chapter, and it is a different chapter. Remember, we just finished a sermon on parables, and this is a really big switch. I mean, the switching scenes is really different. But we have introduction, verse 1 through 3, and then what the next 8 verses about is John the Baptist. And we could all remember, and I'm trying to think of which book it's in. I think it's in Rome. Is it in Rome? Paul's farewell address. Where's that at, brother? His farewell address. I fought a good fight. I finished the course. Is that in Romans? Mine's just going mine.
2 Timothy.
2 Timothy. Thank you, Brother Danny. 2 Timothy. I fought a good fight. Well, this is the final viewing of John the Baptist couldn't go off the scene. So he's not giving us an address, but he's giving us maybe a farewell view of John the Baptist. What became of John the Baptist. And so we see that in verses 4 to 12. And then we switch in verse 13 to the rest of the chapter. If we had people walk out on the stage, and we're going to look at the first three verses. And in fact, let me go ahead and read them in the introduction. The Bible said, at that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus. And he said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead. Therefore mighty works did show forth themselves in him. And then it tells you the next part is going to do with John the Baptist. But it's really, if you had a stage, imagine a stage, you would see Herod walking out, but really pacing back and forth. He'd be pacing back. He got some news that's disconcerting to him. So you find, look at him walking back and forth in the palace, I believe that's exactly what he was doing. So let's look at that. We find, first of all, the delusion of Herod. Look what it says. He said in verse 2, look at the delusion. This is John the Baptist. He's risen from the dead when he heard of Jesus. Therefore, mighty works will show themselves in him. Now, he was deluded. He thought that Jesus was John the Baptist risen from the dead. Yeah. And he had a guilty conscience. And so he's a very troubled man. He's walking back and forth. I don't think he was sleeping much at night. I mean, he heard all of a sudden this Jesus doing these miracles, and he said, oh, this is John the Baptist. He's risen from the dead. And had you been in his place, if John the Baptist had risen from the dead, that man was in trouble because he was responsible for the death of John the Baptist. So there we find his delusion, thinking that it's Jesus risen from the dead. He thought John had risen from the dead. Then we find the detainment of John the Baptist. Look at the rest of the verse. For Herod had laid hold on John and bound him and put him in prison. For Herod died. Herodus, pronounce that, Virgin. Herodias is what I pronounce it. His sake for his brother's full of wife. So here we see John the Baptist is put in prison, and he does so for Herodotus, his brother's wife, which is now his wife, by the way. So he puts John in prison. So he's deluded because he has put John in prison is what has happened. So this kind of opens up the chapter for us, Herod's concern and what he had done with John the Baptist. All right. The next part is John, is look at verse 4. For John said to him, it is lawful for thee to have her. Now, somebody would say the preacher gone to meddling, ain't he? But he was a leader of that country, and he spoke out against the wrong, and he should have. I mean, this was wrong. He took his brother's wife. His brother didn't give him his wife. He took his brother's wife. He was the head man. He could do what he wanted to as the king, and he took his brother's wife, and she gladly came to him. Well, here you see John the Baptist. You find his declaration. Look at verse 4 and 5. For John had said, it's not lawful for thee to have her. And when he would put him to death, he feared the multitude because they counted him a prophet. So here's what he had. Here was his declaration, the first one. The lawlessness of Herod. He said, it's not lawful. You can't have your brother's wife. Come on. You're supposed to be setting a good example for our country. You've taken your brother's wife, made her your wife. And so, but Herodotus is the one that got mad about it. It wasn't so much Herod, it was his wife that got mad. So the lawlessness of Herod. And then I mentioned a couple others just so we remember some of his declarations. Took his brother's wife was there. Then I mentioned it's not lawful to have her. Okay. Then I went back to a couple previous. Remember what he said? Behold, the Lamb of God. That's another one of his declarations that I just want to mention, taking away the sin of the world. Then the third, he's Lord of all. That's the previous declaration. So he had spoken of Christ and who Christ was, but at this time he had spoken out against the head person of the country. And you'll often find out, a lot of times people don't appreciate, even though he told them right. Let's say how we can say this. If a preacher is preaching and he's preaching on morality and he said a man and woman should marry, then they come together as man and wife, which is biblical morality, there's a lot of people won't like that. Why? Because that's not the way they're doing it. It's not the common practice of America. But do you love a person when you condone their activity that's against the commandments of God? No. Now, when he said he spoke out, yes, I'm sure he said, look, Herod, you can't do this. And, of course, which he told him the truth, didn't he? He was honest and told him before God what he needed to do. That was his declaration, 4 and 5. And then I think about I thought about the King of Kings, the song, Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Because he is the Lord of all. And that's the declaration. But the declaration we're concerned about in this chapter primarily was that particular declaration. And then we see John the Baptist again. The dancing of Herodotus, his daughter. We look at it in verse 6 to 8. All right, 6 to 8, yeah. Okay. But when Herod's birthday was kept, the daughter of Herodotus danced before them and pleased Herod, wherefore he promised with an oath to give her whatsoever she would ask. And she, being instructed of her mother, give me the head of John the Baptist and the charger. Now, I told my wife, it's kind of funny. We live in what people do today, common practice, you would have been thought one of the worst moral persons in the world back in my day, Brother Jim. I said, Herodotus got up there to dance, and I would think she danced. I think she's a very pretty woman, and I think she probably danced provocatively. It was probably for their time. But I said, if she was alive today and got up on stage with some of these singers that are #1 singers that everybody goes to the concert, they said that lady's a prude. Look at she would have been a lot more dressed than the people dressed today. Yeah. That's what I said. They thought we should have prude because she'd have had clothes on. And, can you sing with? I think I figured it out, brother. I think I really figured. I know what it is. What do you do in the shower? You sing. So these people think if they don't wear clothes, they sing better because they like you. I thought I had it, but I might have been wrong. I cannot figure what singing and getting up like nearly nude has to do with each other. I think it draws a bigger crowd for the wrong reason. How about that? Yeah. Well, we see her dancing, and she we look at it pleasing of King Herod. He liked it, right? Yeah. What is that? So he was pleased, and she danced before him, and then he was pleased with it. And then he made her a promise. And he said, whatever you want, I'll give it to you, up to half the kingdom. Bad mistake. Give her whatever she asked. And she asked for the head of John the Baptist. I don't think that poor king had a clue what she asked for by the content of our chapter. Look what it says here. Now let's look at the next thing here. It is verses 9 through 11. And here's what it said. And the king was what?
Sorry.
Sorry. Boy, I sure wish I had done that. Nevertheless, he did that in front of all those people for his oath's sake. Was king was sorry. Nevertheless, then we set him at meat. He commanded it to be given to her, and they sent and beheaded John in prison. So here he is. He puts this. He has this girl comes and dances. She dances so provocatively, I think, that the king was pleased, and he promises her, "I want you to want up to half the kingdom." And she asked for the head of John the Baptist, and immediately the man was sorry. But he had all these witnesses, and he made this promise, and so he has sends to have John beheaded in the prison. John's beheaded. I think of that. Some of the great men of the Bible. We complain when we have financial problems or we get sick. What happened to a lot of these people? They gave their life for their faith. Would John the Baptist, question, would John the Baptist had went before the king and denounced him anyway? I think he would, even if he knew. I think he did know what could happen to him. But the right thing to do is the right thing to do, but sometimes there's a big cost to it. Yeah. However, when John the Baptist's life was over, he immediately stepped up before God, and he's you know, what I'm trying to say, this man certainly was a martyr for the faith, and there are a lot. So he's beheaded in prison, and then this is gross, man. How many of y'all would like me to bring your head on Georgia? Now I think Herodotus was pleased because she said, that'll teach you to speak out against me. She took his speaking out against this action as a personal insult. And, well, I'm speculating. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Would you think it's possible, since Herodotus got up and danced like she did, probably provocative, I think we would say it pleased the king. Do you think her mama was a woman of great moral character and strength? No. We would not have asked for his head. So what is it, apple and fault to fault? I think the mom was a problem. Yeah. And she is the person, literally, the king had to officially do it, but she's the person responsible for the death of John the Baptist. Mm-hmm. And I can see her, Miss Sheila, in hell saying, I really wish I hadn't did that. Oh, God. You know, again and again and again. So here's John's head is brought to Herodotus, and she's got her revenge. So we're looking at this view of John the Baptist, what happened to him. We go a little farther here in this, I think. We look at the disciples of John. Look at verse 12. And his disciples came, took up the body, buried it, and went and told Jesus. So here we find the disciples of John and come into action. First thing they do, they buried the body of John the Baptist. Now, Chuck, you're a Bible scholar. In fact, you can tell me where to find my sin because you said the tail of that cat still sticking up. So you're wise.
I'll never forget that.
Do you think? Yeah, I still think about that all the time. Do you think that they got the head? Probably not. I bet Herodotus is not going to give him the head. What do you think? Mm-hmm. But he could have. Speculating. Maybe they asked and maybe they got it. But anyway, John the Baptist was cared for by his lovely disciples. How about that? That's the affection of disciples. In fact, going and asking for the body, what could that have caused for them? They could have been put in jail or lost their life too. And then the second thing they did in this verse, they gave the death notification to Jesus. Now, it wasn't long before this, when John was in prison, he sent two of his disciples to Jesus. Are thou he, or should we look for another? Yeah. Now, I mentioned there may be two reasons. Number one, John is human, and he pretty well knows he's not coming out of that prison. He already, Miss Sheila, he pretty well got that figured out. He's withstood the king and made the king's wife mad, and he's probably already got wind of that. And so it could be, he said, well, could I have missed it? I'm kind of thinking that probably not it, but it could be. And if you'll read that, and say, well, why did John the Baptist ask that question? But you wouldn't think he'd asked it. But I'm not sure that he did not ask that question for the sake of his disciples. He knew he'd be dead. And he reconfirmed their faith that this was the one they could follow. This was the Son of God they could follow. So I think he probably did that in behalf of his disciples. So the disciples, and I mentioned this, back for 6 years I worked as a chaplain for the sheriff's department. And one of the reasons, Miss Sheila, they got me, anytime there's a traffic fatality, being the chaplain, I had to go make the death notification. That way it was a chaplain. I would go in, inform the family, ask them was anybody I could call and minister to them. And it was a good idea rather than just an officer telling you that I'd actually go in and minister to people. And it's a very, very tough job. And I'd have to go in, Brother Jim, and I'd say, and I had my sheriff's, I had a sheriff's windbreaker that I wore, and I would identify myself. I remember I actually went to Macon one time, and I actually went into the man killed him, and I went in the sheriff's automobile. I mean, one with a squad car. But I identified, so I'm Donnie Melton with the Jones County Sheriff's Department. I need to come and talk. Well, I hate for you to come in, the house messed up out here, let you know. And I said, well, ma'am, I really need to come in. And then when I go in, I would say, well, why don't you have a seat there? I'd always get them to sit out. They won't pass out. And then I would say, are you the wife of such and such? And I had the driver's license with me, and I was reading off the driver's license. They said, yes, I am. Then I would inform him. And then I would, tell my call. Well, that's exactly what these men did. They went. Of course, they were going to Jesus, and he really knew. But they brought that death notification that John the Baptist was beheaded down in the prison. If I'm Jesus, of course, if I'm Jesus, I know everything anyway. Then if he'd been just an average person, not the Son of God, he would know his life's in danger, right? But he knew that anyway. He had already foretold that. So here he is, and I want you to know this: the temperament for Christians today is not good. We were once revered and well thought of, but now because we're probably, when you have Pride Month, the church ain't exactly in a favorite spot, but we speak out against Pride Month and homosexuality. And there are people today, and then we expect people to go to church. Come on. There's ball games on Sunday. Now, what's more important, ball games or church? Church. But we'll say, hey, you need to put your family in church, put the Lord first. So we're kind of that person that irritates people. And could there be threats toward us? Possibly as time approaches. But anyway, those men of that day, they were in great danger. And of course, if they turn against Christ to crucify him, Brother Danny, I don't know about you, but I think I know about you. You ever get anybody in church really mad at you? Want to see you gone? Yeah, I have too. And you almost think if somebody said, what about Brother Melton? Crucify him! They would, if they could have got away with it, they'd love to be had crucified. And Brother Danny's been there too. Goes with the pastor. Not everybody likes the pastor, because who's the person to come to you and say, it's not lawful for you to have her? Yeah. The pastor. All right. If he does his job. All right. Now we're going to switch over right quick to the next area. The next area, Jesus, the Son of God. And we're going to start. There's actually three big events. Look at verse 13 down to verse 21. And it's the feeding of the multitude. Look at verse 13. And when Jesus heard of it, now he just heard about John the Baptist, he departed thence by ship to a desert place apart. And when the people had heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities, and went forth and saw And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, and moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. And when it was evening, the disciples came to him, saying, This is a desolate place. The time is now past, send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals or food. Jesus said unto them, They need not depart, give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, Bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to his disciples and to the multitude. And they did all eat and were filled. How about that? And they took up the fragments and remained 12 baskets full. And they that were eaten were about 5,000 men, besides the men and women. That is a notable miracle. 5 loaves, 2 fishes, 5,000 men, not counting the children. Some estimated probably 8 to 10,000, could have been, with the children, you know, those who had children with them. So a large crowd of people. We see the place Jesus went was actually a desert place. He went to be alone, a desert place. But the people, they followed him, and then he encountered a problem. The people were literally faint. I read somewhere where like 3 days. They've been following, listening to Jesus, following Jesus, and the people were faint. They were literally without food for a long period of time, and they really were not. I think one place it says they would faint on the way. These people were not just a little hungry like we are. They had had food quite a while. So that was the problem. And the second problem was they was in the middle of the desert. Where are you going to find food? So you would run down to the Dairy Queen and get us. We want you to pick up enough food for 5,000 people. You better make it for about 8,000 or 9,000. You couldn't even have cooked the food and got it to them. Just think about it. That'd been a lot. But when you're the Lord, what can you do? He just blessed the food, and God performed a great miracle, and he fed. So he fed over 5,000 people. Now, I don't know about you, but I would have been a little awestruck with that, wouldn't you? That's Miss Norma, since you work in the kitchen, you could really appreciate that miracle. That's a big miracle, wasn't it? So the feeding of the multitude, the first major miracle. I mean, this is imagine if that had happened in America. It would be all over the news about this man who fed 5,000 people with just 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So that's the first thing that he did, verse 13 to 21. But we're going to see something else that he did. The next thing is walking on the sea. Look at verse 22. And the Bible said, and straightway Jesus trained his disciples, get into a ship to go before him at the other side. He sent the multitude away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up onto a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It's a spirit. And they cried out in fear. And straightway Jesus spake to them and said, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thy, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. And when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink. He cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and called him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore did thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased, and they that were in the ship, and this is the major verse here, came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth thou art the Son of God.
The master of the sea.
Master of the sea. We just sang it.
Yep.
So here's, not only did he feed 5,000 people, he stood on he calmed a storm at sea and brought these disciples back. But now what we always talk about here is Peter walking on water. But Jesus just walked out. I mean, Miss Sheila, he walked out of the desert place, walked to the sea, and walked to where they were. And he didn't sink. Now, you got to remember, he was in the body of a man just like Peter. But he being, and they said, anybody can walk on water. We kind of use that expression, somebody walking on water, we'll use that as a miracle type thing. We expect me to walk on water, whatever. They just couldn't believe. Here he came walking on the water. In fact, when we saw Peter sink, that reminded them that Jesus didn't sink. In fact, he saved Peter this up. And they cried out once he stilled the storm, walked on the water, sure, and they worshiped him. And I believe I'm right to say this is the first time they did that. Suddenly the light came on. Quick. They kind of knew it, Brother Chuck, but it just hit them full force. This is the Son of God, His person. And sometimes we want to forget that He was always the Son of God. In the beginning, He was the Word was with God. He's always been. He just took the body of flesh. But in the body of flesh, was He limited as a man? No, He could do whatever He chose to do as the Son of God. So He's walking on the sea. We find Him walking on the sea. The difficulty at sea, the storm was, and by the way, it wasn't smooth. Somebody was talking about somebody, they was fishing, and they turned around to go get something, they looked up on the shore, they stepped out of the boat. Sounds like something us older people would do, Brother Chuck. But let me tell you what they said. I discovered I could not walk on water. So I wasn't trying that. Difficulty at sea, there was a storm, the disciples were afraid, they came to the Lord walking on the sea. Then they had the descent of Jesus into the sea. The daring of Simon Peter. Now we do talk about Simon Peter, and that was a daring. And that shows you he walked out of a perfectly safe boat into a stormy sea. You've got to give that man, if you put stars up on the wall for your students, that's when he gets a star. That was but then the circumstances, sort of kind of speaks to me of us. We all love the Lord, we believe in Him, but when the storm comes, sometimes we doubt.
Yeah.
Okay, we feel like we begin to sink. So, then we see the declaration of disciples, surely this is the Son of God. All right, let me give you the third, let me check what time I'm good. All right, coming to the end here. The last thing we sign is the healing at Nazareth, verse 34 to 36. If you look very quickly with me. When they were gone over, they came out of the land of Nazareth, and when the men of that place had knowledge of Him, they sent out into all the country round about and brought unto Him all that were diseased, and besought Him that He might only touch him and go, and many His touch were made perfect whole. So here we see the Lord going from there to Nazareth, goes to the land of Nazareth from the desert place, and the people come to Him. They have heard, and preceding, we don't pay much attention, in fact I didn't, preceding the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, you'll notice He healed people. So the word was out. And probably that's the reason they stayed there and wouldn't leave Him. They saw Him during the time that, in the desert place, the time they spent, they saw Jesus heal those people. But when He comes back out of the desert, they bring Him a great. Let me ask you, would you take your sick relative to Him if you heard he was someplace? Absolutely. So they are symbol there. They come to Him, and the diseased people were made whole. So here we see these three miracles that took place, and really what it does. Previously we heard Him preach, and two things. The way that He preached, and in one place it said, and they were astonished at His doctrine, for He spoke as one having authority. Not His preaching confirmed who He was, because He'd bring things up, prophecy, and talk about. He was this master preacher. But then His miracles, His message and His miracles. And it caused the disciples to cry out, surely, surely. And He is. And you need to leave here thinking, He's the Son of God. And He is the Son of God. All right, we'll pick up and look at a few things next week and finish up this chapter. I tell you what I can do. I'm going to go ahead and give you these, let you fill it out as you can. And if you have some you can't fill, we'll go over the next start of the next I was going to call Brother John. Brother Tony, could you pass these out for us? Thank you, sir. And we'll finish up this chapter next week. Any questions right quick? Any questions about anything right quick?
That's two of the sheet, I'll make sure.
Yes,
In verse
thank
2,
you.
it says that He's risen from the dead, and talking about John the Baptist, and therefore the powers are at work in Him. Does that mean because He's a follower of Christ, like
Well, when he saw the miracles, you know, and it's kind of, it gives you that, then it goes back and gives you the background up to that point, you know, because he'd already, you know, when he starts off, he's already killed him, but then it tells us how it took place. But when he sees these miracles, he knows, he feels guilty over killing John the Baptist, and he knew John the Baptist was among God, so he thought John the Baptist come back alive. And it was kind of scary since you put him to death. Whoa, that'd be bad, wouldn't it? I'd have to say, boy, I messed up, brother. You ever said you messed up? I'm sure you have. Boy, I messed up this time. I said that. Well, let's pray. Father, thank you for a chance to come together to look at the Word of God together, and Father, to see the person of Christ, who he was. Lord, not only was he an incredible human being, he was the Son of God in the flesh that had power to do things that only God has power to do. And he still has that power. I thank you for your Son that loved us and gave himself for us and washed us from our sin in his own blood. Now, Father, bless our pastor today, give him the message we need to hear. May the Holy